Go. All right. So I'll call this meeting to order, the Utility Systems meeting. The TNRD acknowledges we connect with many First Nations. Today we're on the Tecumseh-Secwepemc territory and ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. And we appreciate the partnership we have with Tecumseh-Secwepemc and respect their territory and the land on which we are gathered. Do we have any additions to or deletions from the agenda? Seeing none, I guess we'll move to the minutes. We've got the minutes from the December 13th Utility System Committee meeting. Do we have anybody that wants to make any amendments or alterations to it? Seeing none, can I get somebody to thank Joe and Doug? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I guess we're at reports, and we've got a couple reports starting with the capital projects update. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just before we kick off the reports and I turn it over to Tyrone and Mick, just wanted to announce, and I know some people are already aware, but I'm sad to report this is Mick Horton's last meeting with us. He is, his last day with the TNRD is the end of next week. To quote the email that Tyrone sent out to all staff, he was here for a good time, but not a long time. He's been here with us. He took on the role of Utility Services Supervisor a little over 2 years ago. During that time, he's been a great asset to the department, improving operations, efficiency, and it's been a very strong team leader. So sad to see him go, but he has assured us that he is not leaving because he doesn't like us, but he is moving on to a great opportunity in the private sector. So our loss is definitely someone else's gain. So we'll be hearing from him a lot more today in this meeting, but wanted to get that out there at the start of the meeting.
Sorry to see him go too, but we wish him the best of luck on this, and we look forward to hearing more from you today. All right, so we're going to start with capital projects update. Is that right? Thank you.
That's right. I'll turn it over to Tyrone to speak to that.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. So capital updates or capital projects update is pretty brief today. And we'll start off with our typical agenda for the capital projects update, go through the project funding, the updates, what our future projects are, and then our water system acquisitions, sustainability piece, which will actually be our third agenda item. So currently we have 5 capital projects ongoing that we have grant funding for. So we have our Black Pines Community Water System upgrade, which was the New Build Canada Fund. We have our Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. This is the Pritchard Community Water System Filtration Project. We have the Community Works Benefit Fund, as well as some CCBF, or formerly gas tax, for the Pritchard Community Sewer Treatment upgrade. And then we have our Loon Lake Community Water System automatic transfer switch from the CCBF. And then other funding sources, we received a grant for the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Disaster Risk Reduction. There are 3 more initials after that, which I didn't put up there because CEPF is enough, I think, of a mouthful. But this is for our drought risk and infrastructure resiliency assessments for our water systems. So our table that we show that outlines what the current status is of each project and the funding streams, as well as the project budgets for them. So it's a good one to refer back to, just kind of a summary of the rest of the presentation. So we'll start off with Black Pines. So construction, I'm not going to go into all the history on Black Pines, but this was a project or grant that was received back in 2015. So 10 years in the making. Construction began in October 2022. The building was completed in 2023 in January. In May of 2023, the majority of the mechanical work was completed, and the electrical components were completed in November 2023. The picture on the right there is a tie-in of the new water main that connects the new source to the existing distribution system. So there was no dedicated main to the reservoir. It was just tied into the end of the line essentially. So that occurred without a lot of snow or frost in the ground there back in November. And then in January 2024, we started commissioning this system. Same time, we received substantial performance for the contractor, and we received our water license for utilizing that groundwater source for Black Pines. We had a deficiency list. The deficiencies were completed in May 2024. And then we also, at this time in January, when everything else was kind of coming together, we also received a grant extension. So we don't need the grant extension for the construction of the project, but we do require this grant extension to complete the financial components and reporting requirements of this project. So basically where we're at right now, the system has been online since January. It's been operating without any serious or significant issues. And yeah, I'm hoping this is kind of the last time I talk about Black Pines project here. It's been one of those like stuck at the top of the agenda for years. Anyways, and I'll let Mick talk a bit more about it in the ops update. But yeah, we also had a public meeting out there for the borrowing piece, but essentially it came in well behind our timeline, but on budget. So it's a success. And the groundwater, just from what we were hearing from the community, everyone's quite happy with the water out there. So regardless of the issues we ran into during the construction of the project, it's a good product we ended up with. So moving on to Pritchard Community Water System, our membrane filtration project. So back in July 2023, we received additional funding for this project. If you wanted to know more of the history on this project, the last presentation had a few more slides on it, like with the something's gone wrong slide. So we brought in a new engineering group and started redesign of this project. And we have submitted the new design for a waterworks construction permit to Interior Health Authority. So the civil set is done, the structural and one other set is done. We're just waiting on the final electrical right now. But we anticipate putting this out for procurement either late next week or early July. So we anticipate, shovel in the ground sometime this fall, at the latest next spring. But we'll be going out for procurement here shortly. So I was going to write down June, but if I put June up there, then you guys would hold me to that. So we'll put July is a little safer. And then here's just a picture, one of the pieces, what it'll kind of look like. The building's been condensed significantly from the original design. And then you see our two ultrafiltration trains, membrane trains here, and then a operator with the water quality analyzers, electrical room off the side. So just to cut away some below ground piping, but this will be adjacent to the existing wastewater treatment facility in Pritchard. And pretty excited about where we're going with this. So just fingers crossed this procurement piece is more successful than the last time. So our Pritchard wastewater system. So we're doing an upgrade on our bioreactor. So this asset's at the end of its life, requires replacement. We reviewed options with our consultant to find a scope and cost estimate, received additional funding for this from the board back in July. Then once we received that funding, we confirmed our work plan with a consultant and they initiated design of this. So this design, the membrane procurement for this, so similar idea as what we did with the water treatment facility. You start the design of the system, but your treatment technology is required. You have to pick a treatment technology before you can complete the design and submit it to the regulators for approvals. And so right now on the wastewater side, what we have out on BC bid about a week ago, we put out an RFP for membrane supply for the wastewater facility. And then we will go through a selection process, decide on which membrane technology we go with. And then design will be completed and submitted to the province for the regulators for approval. And then procurement will occur for the construction of the facility for that. So the idea with both of these projects was to realize some efficiencies with design and construction of this. And clearly the timelines don't perfectly line up. However, talking to our consultant yesterday, we anticipate that the procurement for the construction of the wastewater facility will occur while the water facility is under construction. And there will already be a contractor on site mobilized that may be interested in bidding on it. So we may realize some efficiencies there. There are still efficiencies to be realized with the consultant as far as field reviews and design and the level of effort there. It can be overlapping, which is great and what we were counting on to do this. But if we go back to one of the earlier presentations on this, I was saying we're going to line everything up. And so it doesn't line up as far as the construction goes, but the level of effort for the consultant does really show us or provide us some efficiencies on this. So just want to clarify that. Moving on to Loon Lake. So initially we had planned to install 5 or 6 automatic transfer switches. 5 of them were approved. We didn't have the funding for Loon Lake. We received funding for the Loon Lake transfer switch separately. So $18,000 to install an automatic transfer switch, which would allow us to hook up our portable generator in the case of a long-term power outage up there. So the pictures I have here, this is actually our Savanaugh, an external transfer switch that was installed, and this is where our generator connects. These are the generator connection boxes that are applied to all sites that go to the transfer switch so that our operators can take green to green, red to red, and so on, and connect our generator and provide power to these. So we ran into some procurement issues with the transfer switch for Loon Lake because it's at the tail end of our previous of the other 5 procurements. And basically the pricing, the delivery time was pretty extreme. So right now, unfortunately, this project is pretty much on hold because of competing priorities such as Black Pines, Pritchard's, and some other ones we'll talk about, as well as the planning grant we received for Loon Lake for a bottled water fill station. So real estate is at a premium in the Loon Lake community water system and the plant, the facility itself. So if we go put a transfer switch in there right now, we may have to move it, put an external one in if we need the space for a bottled water fill station. So kind of waiting on that. So this additional project and funding we received for the bottled water fill is kind of putting this one on hold for us. So, I mean, the good news is with Loon Lake is that we don't experience an awful lot of power outages on wood there that would adversely impact the system. So. This one isn't so much a capital project as it is a pretty extensive planning or assessment that we're doing. But this is the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for climate adaptation. There's the other couple of acronyms in there. So this is drought risk and infrastructure resiliency assessment for all of our community water systems. So what we're looking at here is what is the risk of drought in that specific utility? What are the and what climate change impacts will have on the risk there? What are some mitigation measures that we can implement? And then what are some future system specific design and structural improvement needs? What this means is that the second and the next step in this grant program, which has historically been undersubscribed, is a structural grant up to approximately $5 million for improvements identified in an assessment like this. So similar to what we did with our master planning for all of our community water and wastewater systems, which identified our improvement needs. And then we went and got gas tax or grants like Pritchard grant for those treatment facilities. This will give us that framework to work off of to go to the next level of the grant applications for any identified source water issues. So it could be something like Black Pines, for example, where the surface water source is moving away from the intakes at risk due to climate change and historical weather patterns. So we want to put a groundwater system in and provide a secure water source for the community. So this is what this whole study is targeted at for the all of our utilities essentially. And where are we at with this? Well, the engineers and the surveyors have completed some surveying of our source water, of our intakes and our groundwater, and are collecting data right now to analyze that. And so this is also goes into climate change modeling and a whole bunch of other things. It's probably not super exciting, but it is kind of exciting. So it opens up another stream, another option, grant option for us too in the future for the disaster preparedness piece. So. All right, future projects. So some of our capital projects that are in the hopper are on the way, ready to go, are Walshing Reservoir. So we did completed an options assessment through a planning grant. Identified that we needed a treated water reservoir to store treated water versus raw water, eliminates the hazards that we currently have to this water system, such as a quarry in the way of our raw water storage facility, and treating water on demand. As the taps open and close, the water gets treated. With a treated water reservoir, we will treat water on a consistent basis, store it, and then it'll be used from the storage tank as it's required. So we're anticipating we will start designing this in the fall of 2024. As the construction season winds down, then our consultant will get on with design of this project and start the permitting process. And if all goes well, we'll start construction next year. Our planning grants, I know I talked about these last time, but we had a bit of a discussion about rates in between the last meeting and this one. So figured I'd throw these up there again. The Evergreen and groundwater, so this is currently in progress. This is our smallest system, and we do have issues with access to our intake through private land, not part of the water system. And this is surface water source again. So we have a high cost to treat, and with 16 connections there, it's not very practical to treat it. So we're looking at exploring for groundwater options there and seeing what kind of possibilities there are. And then the Loon Lake water filling station, like I mentioned before. So we have the turbidity and manganese issues in Loon Lake. We have a very seasonal customer base, and the feasibility of putting in a water fill station is what we're looking at. And that should be a significantly less expensive option than installing treatment for surface water for essentially a seasonal customer base that irrigates the majority of the time with it. And then finally, I just want to put up Mr. Vieira asked me to put up our 5-year capital plan. And I said, Jamie, it's going to take like 6 pages to display it. So I put in the, I guess the highlights from it.
Say what I said.
Yeah, Jamie's like, well, just put the sexy stuff in there. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess an intake pump is kind of, anyways. So all I want to do highlight with this and the color coding, which doesn't show up here very well, but green means it's funded, yellow means it's partially funded, and red means it's not funded right now. So I wanted to show what the project was, what system it affects, and the funding, and as well as the funding requirement and the anticipated year. So a big one on here, $11.5 million. It's the Savinaw water treatment plant. It's in our capital plan to do it then. we don't have the money to do it. So it's grant dependent. So it can be a little bit deceiving if you look at our 5-year, 10-year capital plan with the projects we have in there and the funding source. The funding will be through a grant, but the grant is yet to be received or even applied for at this point. So the good news is that we do have some money in our reserves for Blue River for water main replacement. We are proceeding with some water quality analyzers and disinfection system upgrades through CCBF as well as our reserves for our system. So this is all being funded. These are some of the projects that we are able to right here complete because of our rate adjustments that we made and the I guess our confidence that we have now in having being able to replenish the reserves and put some money in reserves for these projects and the replacements of the aging infrastructure out there. So,
And Tyrone, I'll just jump in if you don't mind. So you may be asking yourself, well, why do we bother putting things in the capital plan that are not funded? And the answer to that, this is just one more mechanism to show that we need these capital assets and upgrades, and we're planning for them. So when we're asking the higher levels of government for grant money, we can show and prove that we're needing them, planning for them. They're even right here in the capital plan. We just need them to come to the table with the money.
so the other piece that we have with this is it also provides a bit of a roadmap for our CCBF funding and our CWF funding, the community works benefit too as well. So we have to earmark that for our projects, and with the capital plan through the entire TNRD, the organization, then we can kind of forecast that out so that when anyone comes to me and says, hey, can we do this project over here? The customers are asking for this. And then we say, well, and let's just throw some gas tax at it, for instance. We can look at our capital plan and be like, well, it's in our capital plan. This needs to be done. And this is what it's forecasted for. So, yeah. That's the more color. Anyways, so that was the end of my capital projects update. Any
Thank you,
questions?
Tyrone. So we've got some questions here. Go ahead, Lee.
Thank you, Tyrone. I just had a question on Blue River and that $200,000. Was that money is it paid for and it's done? And was that from Trans Mountain and savings that the community had, or how did that come about?
So the water main replacement in Blue River has not been completed yet. The funding is through the reserve, which isn't from Trans Mountain, but the Trans Mountain funding or the Trans Mountain money that we received in Blue River allowed us to complete some engineering work and design for that project, and allowed us to utilize or essentially not spend as much out of the operating budget and put more to reserves to be able to fund that. So
We've got Usoff and Jim Smith on the line here, and Usoff's got his hand up. Go ahead, Usoff.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, just 1 sec. Let me open up my note there. With regards to the budgeting for future projects in light of recent vandalism at some of the TNRD community parks facilities, do you think for future projects we need to add in extra costs for security measures, especially something like the water filling station at Loon Lake? Thank you.
yeah, I'm not quite sure how to answer that one, but typically we are required to secure our water systems, and if there are potential issues at a Loon Lake filling station, for instance, we could look at different methods to secure that. Typically our security is fencing a reservoir access or the intake accesses. So as far as cameras and security go, we haven't had to go that far yet, but I'm sure as things change, we will be looking at those options.
Yeah, and thanks, Tyrone. I could add to that as well. Generally speaking, the types of security we put in place at different facilities and our different assets really depends on the specific needs of that site and issues. So I'll just use solid waste, for example. We don't invest, in a $50,000 security system for all 27 of the sites, but we do for a few sites where we have ongoing challenges. So I would say the same thing in utilities, where we'll target where we have those issues. And we're also limited in what we can do in some of these remote sites that have limited connectivity as well. So.
Just Jamie jogged a memory here but we have one of our security threats, I guess, would be cybersecurity for our water systems and our SCADA programs and whatnot. So on our capital plan there, in 2026, we had $130,000 allocated for replacing our current communication and SCADA network. That might be something that we bump up based on recent discussions and where everything with cyber security and everything is going. So we do look at all of the, I guess, aspects of the system, not just the physical piece, but also the cyber piece too. So,
Director Houghton.
Thank you, Director Grenier. Tyrone and Jamie, can you maybe bring back that spreadsheet that you had up with all the different systems and expand on the plans for Del Oro? That last one, yeah. There's 3 or 4 different items.
yeah, so Del Oro, we have reservoir baffles. So a lot of this information, these funds and dollar figures are put in through our some of the asset management work that has been done on our facilities. So their end of useful life for the baffles, 2027 is the target for that. And the price tag based on inflation from the time that they were installed looks at $71,000. When you move down the screen there, we're looking at a reservoir for Del Oro of $679,000 at the same time. That's where it's expected or anticipated to be the end of its useful life. Whether it actually is or isn't known yet. There are different ways to assess conditions of assets. And the majority or primarily we have typically used a lifespan for assets, just a timeline. So 50 years, 70 years, 100 years, depending on the asset type. But as we get closer to some of these, we can improve our condition assessments on these assets and then find a better spot of the timeline for it. And similar to Wallachine as well, distribution, like the water mains. So these water mains are 40 to 60 to 80 years old. They are in our system as being built in like Savinaw of 1972 and so on. So then they're forecasted out 50 years saying, okay, well, you need to replace these assets now. Okay, we need to have a financial plan in place to replace them. Clearly our reserves, and this all goes back to the last meeting about our infrastructure deficits and whatnot. Where are you going to get the money to replace these assets that are going to essentially, if they're at the end of their useful life and they do fail, how do we replace them and fund that? So that's also what the capital plan is trying to show. Just because there isn't funding available right now for it, but these are items on our books that do need to be looked at and addressed.
I've got Lee, go ahead.
So we need the microphone, do we? Just using Evergreen as an example, really small one, obviously. So currently it's on a surface water system. Is that correct? And then you spoke to this 4321. Can you just explain to me, so a little tiny system like that one, I think there's what, 16 user groups or something like that on it. Where would we be sitting from a budget perspective to move that project through to that? I'm more just to get a sense of where some of the costs generally come in at with these smaller ones as well.
Yeah, I mean, putting a budget number to a treatment facility for a system that small is very challenging. I mean, we can only really compare to what we're already doing in Pritchard, which is a much larger system, larger than our average size, even at $5 million. But I believe we did a feasibility study for the Paul Lake Waterworks, which Jamie will talk about at the end of the meeting. But I think we were looking at about $2.5 to $3 million for something like that. The issue, it always seems like the treatment technology itself isn't the most expensive part. It's the civil work and everything else that goes with it. So it's getting the power to it, the buildings, the piping. And in most of our cases, for most of our systems, it's how do you deal with the reject water or the backwash water, how do you dispose of the wastewater from a treatment facility? So those are some of the issues we look at, and it might be a land issue too. So it's really, really hard to put a number to it and be like, hey, it's going to be $2 million for these guys or $5 million for this. The Savanaugh preliminary design we did was like 9.6 or something $million. And I'm forecasting in 5 years from now, it's going to be 11.5, and it might be 13. It might be 9.5. Right? But we'll have to dust it off when a grant project comes up and see what the pricing is then. So until we get a preliminary design done for a facility, it's really hard to put a price tag to it. And we actually look at all the different surprises right. So get an assessment of what options we have for it. And that's why Evergreen, we are looking at a groundwater option, somewhere that we have a secure source, secure access. And groundwater historically requires far less treatment than surface water. So.
Yeah, per capita cost obviously is really high on something like that. And I guess the secondary on that, groundwater, if the ultimate decision conceivably is a cost of that 3 million or whatever, how much that's going to be, the groundwater, can it be retained as a water source and meet IHA standards? I'm just trying to, so when you've got these little tiny parcels, is that an option, or are we forced in a sense to go forward on those costs?
Yeah, so the 43210 objectives are applied to primarily surface water for treating. So you have to treat it 4 log removal of viruses and 3 log of cysts and 2 forms of treatment. And groundwater gives you a secure source, like in the instance of both Blue River and Black Pines, where they are not at or under the influence of surface water. And so you don't have the risk of those pathogens that you would in surface water with groundwater. Okay. So then you treat for aesthetic items like manganese and iron. But when you're going for groundwater, you can also run into things like arsenic and other issues, which you would have to treat for as well. So in the case of Blue River, we have great groundwater with very little mineral content or any content of anything in it, and very safe water. In Black Pines, we have slightly elevated manganese with exceeds the aesthetic objective, so it's not as palatable as the Blue River water, but it's safe. And from a health perspective, it doesn't exceed the maximum acceptable concentration, which is a health limit. And so groundwater on the smaller systems is, if you have it, you try and keep it. And as far as like with the study that we're doing for Evergreen, it'll look at what's the capacity of the wells, how much groundwater is actually available there, what's the recharge, and what are some of the risks that we have with climate change and drought periods and stuff too. So I don't know if that answered all of your question, but.
Thank you. More than anything, I'm sorry to use up time on an education process, but thank you very much.
More than happy to. So.
I've got some questions. If we could bring up the slide again on the numbers, the financials. We got elected about 18 months ago, and none of these systems are dependent on each other. They're dependent on funding. We got to go get funding sources. And when I look at the Savinaw thing, we've got 11.5 million in 2008. We got 4.2 in 2027. That's a big hunk of dough, and we have what I'm hearing is we're not in the pipeline with any funding grants. We're just waiting for a grant program to open up. And I'm not sure, at least I can speak for myself. My constituents are expecting something to be done about it, proposals. If I have to go bang on doors of ministers, I got to go do that some more. But I don't think that we can sit here and just say we're waiting for that grant program to open up. So can you tell me what it is I can do on next steps to start being aggressive about that? I had thought that maybe it was coming a little sooner than it is, and we've got to try to expedite that. And other directors may feel the same way, but that there's 500 people there that we've told their water's going to get improved as soon as we get a grant program, but we don't have even a program to apply for right now. So.
Yeah, thanks for that. Good question. Point of clarity, yes, we have it at 2028 in this 5-year plan. We could easily amend our capital plan if a grant opportunity comes up sooner. That said, like I said before, we want to make sure it's reflected in the capital plan, as this is a plan of the regional district. It's built in to do this. We just need the money for it. So yeah, I wouldn't stress about where it is in the capital plan. If a grant opportunity came up tomorrow that we can apply for, then through the board, we can amend the capital plan to move that forward by a couple of years. But back to your bigger question, and we've had discussions about this before. I guess my comments are the mechanism that the higher levels of government give out money is through grant programs, not through individual asks. And that's why they create grant programs, so they're not dealing with individual asks. But from a political perspective, from the lobbying perspective, yeah, we need grant programs that are funded, that are high percentage funded, so we can afford to do it. And as we've talked about before, each system has a differing degree of willingness to borrow, because in some cases, like Savinaw, for example, they're already paying towards capital. So Savinaw, the Savinaw community is already paying towards their reservoir, for example. So even if a grant program came out that's, let's say, 3/4 funded or 2/3 funded, the electorate would still need to approve taking on more debt that they're paying on. So I'm kind of just putting that out there, and I know Chair Grenny's aware of all this, but for the benefit of the other committee members as well, that's each system, we're in that unique scenario, is what's the willingness of the people to pay, and waiting for the grant.
Well, all right. So roughly, we've got, just quick math, we've got about $6 million of other projects plus about $16 million on Savinaw. So I think what we need to do is we need to aggressively approach whatever ministry you're telling us. I'm quite happy to jump on a plane, go to Victoria. We've got an election coming up, see if we can secure funding or some process. Even if they said to us, we'll kick in 75, you guys kick in 25. I think that is something that we can then chew over. But I think we've got to step it up now, be more aggressive to get these projects done, or committed to anyways, funded. I don't know if you could comment on that, and then I'd love to hear from anybody else whether they feel a need to get their projects done.
From a staff perspective, really, I have no further comments. I understand your point and agree with you, and that's the role of the board to try and get that forward, move that forward. All I can say is I'm confident we're doing everything we can on our end. We're continually monitoring any opportunities that come up, and we'll pursue any that in terms of existing grant programs. We have no mechanism to further, as from a staff perspective, further push the government on that, but absolutely that's a role of the board.
We've gone down the road with the small water utilities matching grant initiative. We've got that adopted at Silga, moving forward to UBCM. But I think we should maybe put together for UBCM or before UBCM a list of must-haves and get some of these things knocked down, or get it in the ear of the minister or the ministries. I don't think we can just wait for a grant program to be announced.
Yeah, we can consider that in terms of the UBCM meetings. I know we already are planning to have them related to utilities. This can be added to that discussion. But again, from our perspective, the grant, waiting for the grant programs is the only thing we can do. From our point of view of looking at these, by all means, speaking to ministers to encourage that grant program is the board's prerogative, and UBCM is one mechanism of that. I do understand that there was coming out of FCM, there was also a resolution to push the federal government to provide additional capital for all the infrastructure deficits that all municipalities and local governments across the country are dealing with. So I say unfortunately we're not unique, because there's a lot of other local governments that are in the same situation that have the same deficit issues and are scratching their heads, what can we do next? But that said, we'll do everything we can to prioritize our projects from the staff end.
Okay, does anybody have anything else to talk about on this first section on the capital side? All right. Can we get to the next one, please?
Afternoon, everyone. This is the operations update for the Utility System Committee. Agenda for this is staffing update, kind of a year-to-date review of what we've accomplished, and then what's next on the books for the rest of the year for the operations team. So for our staffing update, we currently run 4 operator positions. We have one operator that has just recently gone off on a knee replacement, so he's gone for 4 to 6 months. I've got another operator, which is a brand new hire as of May 6th. So our experience levels and manpower is quite low in our operations group right now. I just had one operator also return from a medical event. He was off for 5-6 weeks. So we've been running quite shorthanded in our department. We run 3 casual positions as well. I have one position that is filled that I have availability Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for. I have a summer student that is available, and my other casual position is currently on vacation for 4 to 6 months. So I'm quite light-handed. We also run 3 contract positions. Our Blue River position, we have a retirement there, but we've filled that contract. Loon Lake, I have a potential for retirement as soon as I can fill that, but I have no applicants on our board. We put up contracts for Loon Lake and Spence's Bridge and got no applicants at all. So currently using our casuals and our operators to do all the services in Spence's Bridge right now. Oh, yes, and we have Vavenby as well. Sorry. And our contractor in Vavenby is a good contractor and not close to retirement, so I think we're good there. Year to date, I am going to go system by system quickly talk through things. If you have any questions about any of the systems in your areas as we're going, just feel free to interrupt and ask them as we go. So for Black Pines, like Tyrone's talked about this project over and over, it is now up and running, and we have removed all of the water quality advisories in that system. We currently have the one well pump, which is in great condition, obviously, because it's brand new. And we have the backup river pump, which is a bit old, but definitely functions as long as it's not -30. We've done hydrant maintenance and flushing in Black Pines this year. We've installed some new door locks in there and done all our samples and everything that's required in Black Pines. Blue River this year, it's been pretty quiet in Blue River for us. Like I said, we have a new operator there, so he's getting up to speed. He's working with our retired operator, getting up to speed on some of the system requirements there. The generator install from last year is successful. We've used that generator now, I think twice. It's fired up in Blue River, so it's really saved us from having to pull our temporary generator up there. We also did this service install on 878 Harwood. Past that, like I said, Blue River's been running really well. Deloro, pretty quiet this year. We've done our regular pump rebuilds. Evergreen, same thing, just pump rebuilds there. We have the number 2 pump at Evergreen, which has been an issue for quite some time. We're going to go and have a look at that in the next 2 weeks before I leave, and hopefully get a solution for that one before I'm gone. Little Fort, nothing too crazy goes on in Little Fort. It's pretty quiet. Community hall water system. I've got an operator there today doing the chlorine pump rebuild on that one as well, so it should be good for a couple of years. Loon Lake, we had a flushing unit in Loon Lake, but the ground had eroded around it. So I sent a couple operators up there and they rebuilt the flushing unit and the groundwork around it and some of the drainage. Maple Mission, we have done the groundwork around the pump house as shown in that picture. We hauled a couple of loads up there. It was really lumpy and gross all the way around that pump house. So we did a bunch of cleanup on there. We've also done the pump rebuilds as required there to date as well. We did the well pump rehabilitation last year as well, late in the year. So that system should be good for 10 years or so. Pritchard, we did an AC install in Pritchard just to help with our chlorine room. The river levels are super high again, and so there's a lot of water in the water table comes up in Pritchard quite high. So you see a lot of water in some of our valve boxes and stuff like that. So might have complaints or noise about that, but it's just river water. Savanaw, we had a major pump failure this year. The lake pump blew up on us on May 15th. I took a team there on May 16th. We issued a water advisory and we replaced that pump on May 16th. It was about a 10-hour day. Pulled 150 meters of pipe out of the lake and replaced the pump. We happened to have a spare on site, so no service interruptions for that. I got a quote for the new pump. It's sitting at around 16,000. I've just asked them to re-quote adding check valves and some changes in that pump, but it should come in fairly close to that. The picture you're showing there is a dig that we did on Bowie Street. We were going to do a little more work there and install some valves and stuff like that, but kind of ran out of time that day. We were having some issues with some of the valving in the town actually sealing up for us and providing a good seal. So we've documented everything that we found on our exploration digs, and we'll get back to this in the future for the looping of Bowie Street. Spence's Bridge, been at Spence's Bridge lots this year, lots going on there. The bottom left is the pressure relief valve that, it was about a 4-month delivery to get that thing. We purchased that and installed it, got a repair kit for the one that came out. So we're going to do a rebuild on the one that came out and use it on the other side in Spence's Bridge. We've also been dealing with quite a few issues with our well levels on in Spence's Bridge. So had contractors out there a couple of times looking at that, hoping to have that solved shortly as well. We installed new locks in Spence's Bridge. We installed AC this year. We have gone for a quote for a well rehab on well 3 in Spence's Bridge. The well 3 is the main producing well in Spence's Bridge. We use that as our primary well, and then we use backups. We use well 2 as the backup. But well 3, because it's been running as the primary, is getting quite tired. So got a quote for that rehab and pump change out there. It's part of our capital costs as well. We've assisted the Cook's Ferry Band with 1 dig this year, and we assisted with some hydrant rebuilds. And we're going to team up with them to do some flushing and the remaining hydrant rebuilds in the community. We also had a large depression behind the pump house, just from the way the drains come through the pump house. It had built quite a depression in behind, so I sent the guys there one day, and they took the dump truck and we filled in that depression and got it safe again for the community.
Director Thorpe?
Question.
Yes.
Thanks. Spence's Bridge, water levels with the wells, what's going on exactly?
So the it's actually our well transmitter that is not functioning properly.
Okay, layman's terms, I'm sorry.
It's the so I think what's happened there is we have a card that's in there that helps transmit our well level. That card is quite burnt. I've got to order another one to plug it in and make sure that that is actually the issue. But the well levels, like you're talking, like whether or not we have water there, is that what you're? Yes. As far as I'm concerned, we have water there. And it is all just electronics that is causing the well issues.
One
Thanks.
of the other things on the, excuse me, on the Spence's Bridge piece is that we had budgeted in the capital plan for the new well pump and well rehab. So the well rehab, like these pumps or these wells have been operating for quite a few years without any maintenance done on the wells itself. So they're due for the screen cleaning. And basically they flush the well so that it opens up the pores on the screen. What could happen is that we're seeing lower levels in the well casing itself because the screens are getting plugged up. And that happens over time, and you schedule the work over time. So it's actually come due this year, and we do have the reserve money to do that work, which Mick has received quotes for and stuff. So it is planned and budgeted for.
Thank you.
Vavenby has been super quiet. I haven't even been to Vavenby this year, so it's been very nice. I've driven through it, but
Good news.
it is. It's great news. When we don't get calls, it's great. The only thing that we did do in Vavenby is we finalized our transfer switch in Vavenby. So we pulled the generator up there and we sent an electrician up there and got the transfer switch operational. So if we do ever have a power issue in Vavenby, our generator just plugs directly into it now and everything runs fine. Wallachine, we had a fairly major leak in Wallachine through the winter. We went there multiple times, did I think 3 days of digging, just kind of exploring, trying to find the main as it ran through, is that Central Avenue? Yeah, so the all the drawings showed the main to be on the side of the shoulder of the road. We dug there looking for it. We dug deeper looking for it. Finally, we ended up having to dig through the road to actually find the main. So we think that The paving over the years has changed where the roadway is, and now the road is directly over top of our main. So we've done that work. I've got a call into a contractor to go in and repair the paving there, but we did repair the 2 cube an hour leak that we had there, so it's good. In our wastewater systems, we have, the picture shows our new generator there in Pritchard, the Dyperk. It is up and operational. We've had a power outage there twice as well, and that one kicked in and ran power no problem in Pritchard. So that unit is sized to run the new water plant and the new sewer plant once they're both commissioned. So we're ahead of the game on that front. The system is quite old, so we do spend quite a bit of time out there just doing minor repairs. We did a UV system overhaul this winter, tore the whole UV system apart, put a whole bunch of new parts into it to keep it running. And we've got a contract to do a system flush on the whole Pritchard sewer system and to clean out the lift station. We currently are getting ingress of rocks and gravel into our system, which is causing early pump failures. So we want to get that all cleaned out so that we stop losing pumps there. Kind of for the rest of the year, the what's next list. In our water systems, we're going to continue sampling weekly and make sure that we do our 4 samples a month for the rest of the year. We're going to continue doing flushing and hydrants throughout the communities. We have a service install in Savinaw that we'd like to do along Savinaw Access Road. We also have a service install in Wallachine that is coming up as well. The rehab in Spence's Bridge, like I discussed, probably be happening late summer into the fall. Probably wait until the water consumption goes down a little bit so that we can do that without impacting the community. We have a bunch of analyzer equipment that we are going to replace in 7 of our sites, just waiting for some permitting on that. And then we're going to tackle that so that our analyzer equipment is all up to date. We have a vehicle purchase that we are looking into right now for a good used dump truck that we would like to add to our fleet to make it a little easier for us to go to digs. We need to do some warehousing and restocking from some of the work that we've been doing. In our sewer system, we've got the cleaning of the sewer system and the lift station in Pritchard. That's kind of number 1 on my priority list, just to try and keep that plant running. We also want to change out the RBC in Paul Lake. Just waiting for a contract on that as well. It's kind of under 10 grand kind of job. We have a yearly pumping campaign for all of our sewer systems in Paul Lake that we still have to put forth as well. And the number 2 sand filter requires repair in Pritchard as well.
Well, thank you for that report, Mick. And again, thank you for your time here and taking care of us while you've been here. Does anybody have any questions for Mick? Go ahead, Lee.
Thank you very much for that. I have, what's that, sorry? Oh, use that, it's on YouTube. Yeah. Sure. I just have a few specific questions that perhaps you can help me with. So one is from the community. They're concerned obviously with forest fires, and they've asked about the WASP fire protection or suppression systems that are available. And if there our improvement district potentially might help the community to get these and to install them. And would that be a problem in Blue River? to have those, like for access for water, if every household had one and they were going during a fire situation?
Well, I'll start by answering that, or maybe just clarifying questions. So the scenario would be that these are things that people install on their individual house. Okay, so I guess the question is around water supplies. Do we have enough supply? I mean, we'd have to, probably can't give you an answer off the top of our head. We'd have to run the numbers to find that out. So I guess the question is like, if every house had one, is there enough water to supply it? Okay, we'll probably have to take that one back. Go ahead, Tara.
I mean, I don't know how those systems work, but if someone was to put a sprinkler on their roof in every single house in Blue River, our system would likely keep up, and basically the answer would be it'll keep up until it doesn't. We have backup power, so we'll keep pumping water until they either run the reservoir dry or we just can't keep up with capacity. But for the most part, I think it would also, we'd have to look at our regulatory management bylaw and sprinkling. Whether you put a sprinkler on your lawn or on your roof, can't do it between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. So we have to look at some other things with that too. But as far as capacity goes, the system there has a significant amount of capacity to provide fire protection as well, and probably the garden hose as well. So
Okay, thank you for
So,
that.
so to add to that, I would just definitely, the message to take back is it's definitely a maybe an option. And if there's serious consideration moving forward, then I think engaging with us and we could kind of have that dialogue with specifics of what units are looking at, what kind of output we're talking
Sure.
about. And then we could, if they're serious about it, we can do the modeling and have those discussions. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and then I just have one more thing to talk about. So when Blue River installed the water meters, or when the water meters were installed there, I've heard from Don, the retiring contractor, that the water consumption was reduced by 90%, which I think is a really huge success story. And I feel that that is messaging that through Colton, we could give to our community, if that is accurate. And if it is, I think it's an awesome story to tell and let people know, because not everyone knows this. Okay, thank you.
I just have a comment on that. We actually used Blue River as an example of why water meters work so effectively, because it showed us, it helped us identify where the leaks were and whether they're on the public side or on the private side. So it gives you that data to prove and find where those leaks are.
Director Sao online.
Thank you, Chair. Adding to Chair's comments, thank you, Mick, for all your service with us, keeping our systems running. Just one question. I have a recollection of you mentioning you were taking on a project to streamline the projects or ticketing process within the utilities services. How, I think you mentioned the existing process was, just people writing down notes and having their own list, and you were trying to centralize that into a database or a more formalized system. Are you able to pass on that project to somebody else, upon your departure? Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. That process has been in play for the last year and has been working really well. Tyrone's up to speed on everything in that process, and we're just trying to do some fine tuning before I leave to make sure it's easy for him to take over.
And I should put a plug in that we already have the vacancy of Mick's position posted. So if you know anyone who's interested, pass that on.
Thank you for that. And I actually was going to ask you, Mr. Vieira, if you could tell us, Mick has told us that we've got a few folks that are either off or vacant spots. What, do you want to comment on how desperate we are or not?
Oh, yeah, thanks for that. I wouldn't quite use the word desperate. I think challenged was the word. But we, the new hire that Mick mentioned, is we he came from the city of Kamloops with a lot of experience. So he's new to our system, but he has a lot of experience in tickets. So we're really excited about him being on board. We have summer students that are, or a casual person who actually is a student, a mature student who we just started 2 weeks ago. That's working out quite well. So yeah, we definitely have some gaps there that we're needing to fill. But I wouldn't say we're at the point of desperate. We're able to keep up, but it's a challenge. And I mean, the labor market in general is a challenge. So we're definitely subject to it like everyone else is.
Does anybody have any other questions? No? All right, I guess we can move to the next item. And that would be the Paul Lake Water Works acquisition.
Thank you, Chair. I'm gonna speak to that one. So before I get into the presentation, the caveat is I'm gonna just breeze through these slides. I don't expect everyone to read all the information, but I wanted to keep these as a record in this meeting. So if you want to look for more detail. The purpose of this agenda item is really just to inform this committee of the process that we are going through with Paul Lake Waterworks. So I've talked to this committee before about our sustainability and acquisition strategy that sets out the process for if a private system comes to the TNRD requesting that TNRD take it over, we have a detailed process that we go through. So that strategy was adopted by the board back in 2018. This is the first time we're actually putting it to the test. So we're kind of halfway through or partway through this process with Paul Lake Waterworks, and we just had a community meeting with them. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for those who weren't there, just Director Morris was there, to kind of just understand sort of how that rolled out, and I'll speak to that as we go through. So to summarize, this presentation is an excerpt of the presentation that was given to the committee, to the community on June 5th. So there's a bit of a timeline here, 3 slides here where actually one of the directors from Paul Lake Waterworks talked about the history of their system for the benefit of the membership that was there in the meeting. So for those who know Paul Lake, it's predominantly the strata development. I'm drawing a blank on the name. Deerwood strata, which is right on the south end of Paul Lake, as well as 13 residential properties that aren't immediately connected to the lake that are connected with that system. So again, I won't speak to the history, but they did go through the history to talk about when it was first established, challenges. They even spoke about their rate increases, trying to increase their rates to keep up with the requirements. So it's interesting. As an observer in the meeting, we're sitting there listening to them as a private system, talking to their membership about their challenges and having to constantly increase the rates to try keep up with requirements and technologies and replacement of systems. So very much the same messaging that we're here talking to this committee about, and I know you guys and us are talking to the public about. So it's same challenges in a private system as in a government system. So he kind of concluded by just explaining why they're approaching the TNRD. They actually did approach the TNRD at one point a while ago, and then they've kind of reapproached us to consider the acquisition and explain the rationale for it. And really, it's the same story that they're continually to see their costs go up, knowing they need significant capital replacements. How do they fund it? And then the big one of the big challenges when you think about a private system, that is, I appreciate Chair Grenier's comments about the grants and waiting around for grants. At the same time, the private systems don't even have the opportunity. They don't qualify for grants. So that's often in the backdrop. If we, from the system's perspective, the membership's perspective, they're thinking, well, if we became a TNRD system, at least we have the chance of getting other grant money. So from there, during the meeting, I jumped in and gave a few slides just explaining to the community of that we have this sustainability and acquisition strategy and how it works. And so I highlighted specifically just our policies around the acquisition piece. Obviously, the rest of the policy relates to our own systems that we currently own and operate. So I highlighted just a few of those key points that I've spoken to here before. But you know, the big ticket items and my message to the community was that this policy clearly lays out we will not take on a water system unless it's meeting the provincial IHA requirements and is financially sustainable. So those are big ticket items. So this is an excerpt straight from our policy that details sort of the preliminary assessment when there's a request going into a comprehensive assessment to establish what needs to be done to bring it up to that level to meet everything in our acquisition strategy, to meet all those requirements. So one of the key pieces in this is a feasibility study that needs to be done. So to back up, when they first came with the request to us, I believe it was 2 years ago, the director at the time worked with us to find some grant opportunities and fund the study to be done. So we're able to get grant funding to fund True Engineering to do the feasibility study to actually do a preliminary design and cost it out. So we could actually go back to the community and said, this is exactly, or I shouldn't say exactly, this is generally what would need to be done, and this is generally the cost if you want to go further down this road and consider transferring to the TNRD. So at that point in the meeting, we switched it over to the engineers to speak about the feasibility study. The study was posted online. We have a sub-page for it. It's still available online. So any of the residents could review it beforehand, and now it's available for them afterwards as well. It's publicly funded, so it's publicly available, a document, even though it relates to the private system. So I definitely won't get into the details of the actual feasibility study because again, every system's going to be different. But essentially, this slide kind of summarizes the real high level. What the report does is looked at, well, what are the existing system deficiencies, and then came up with a preliminary design to fix all those deficiencies, and then come up with a cost and an estimate of what that would cost. So they talked through the different deficiencies in this particular system, what was good, what was bad, what was unknown. And then showed, again, getting into a preliminary design of what the system would look like, what changes would take place, replacing equipment versus using existing piping infrastructure. So I won't get into that detail here, but you can really geek out on it in that report if you're curious. But then it came to this slide, the big slide, where we said to them, okay, we talked about what the deficiencies were and what we proposed to do to fix them, and this is the cost. So the preliminary design estimate comes in at $2.7 million to upgrade the system to meet our policy. That's including engineering services contingency. Also built in there was a forecast to actually operate and maintain the system on an ongoing basis. Interestingly, that $50,000 a year, the current owners operators of the system said that was in line already with what they're costing, is a little bit higher, but not much different. So they weren't blown away by that number. But obviously with a system with 40 something connections, trying to blank on that right now, but 40 to 50 connections, you divide $2.7 million, it's still a big chunk of money. And I should back up. What was being in terms of technology, we were proposing a filtration system, a membrane filtration system. I'm sure you can't even read this, but this is in the report. I just like to show this because it's a really effective tool. This table was taken right out of our acquisition strategy, and what was added in terms of the report was, how does the existing system as is right now meet or not meet all the aspects of the acquisition strategy in our policy? And then under the preliminary proposed design, does it check all the boxes? So this is a very good visual saying, currently, these are all the gaps. Under the preliminary design that we put together, we check all the boxes that it would meet the TNRD's requirements if you did all this work as per the feasibility study. So then we ran two real just scenarios. We were careful to kind of clarify, these are just essentially hypotheticals around grant funding. So we gave the two costings, one of them being if they wanted to move forward and go through a public assent process for the TNRD to acquire them with fully funded by the users of the system, what would that look like? And so that's the first, this work, yeah. So that's this top line here. So the first 20 years as they pay off the capital, they're looking at an annual cost of $7,000. That's covering their current operation and maintenance costs, plus paying down the capital. And then after the 20 years, once it's paid off, drops down to $2,800 a year. And then again, for discussion purposes, as a hypothetical, and we made sure to clarify this, if there was grant funding available, and what would that look like? Typical grants, common grants are 2/3 funded by the higher level government. So if we had to borrow 1/3 from the people connected to the system, the users, what does that look like? And it's $4,200 a year. So we did clarify to the community who was there that we have many other water systems that are in need of grants, and so this would obviously not be the top priority for the board, as all grant applications do go through the board. However, there is a hypothetical scenario that there's grants that a grant program that meets the requirements of one system much better than another. And we've talked about this before in this committee. There may be a grant for, let's say, a maximum of $2 million. Well, that's not going to help us build a water treatment plant in Savinaw, but it could be used for a smaller project, that sort of thing. So after we talked through that, a lot of question, answer, discussion, a lot of technical discussion with our engineers and with the community about the preliminary design. What we concluded with is we're going to move forward with a community survey. The survey is going to be a little different than what we typically do in public assent processes, because we're not just going to be asking questions from the TNRD perspective, but we're going to work with Paul Lake Waterworks, who owns and operates the system, for them to add their questions in to get feedback from their users. So whether or not it's a TNRD system moving forward, what that looks like, what are their other options, and get some feedback from their community that way. So then I kind of jumped back in and explained what it would look like if we went down the road of the TNRD option. So we'd have to continue to follow everything in our acquisition strategy in terms of further steps around the feasibility and funding for that work. And there would be a formal public assent referendum process, again, clarifying that the survey is not the public assent process. And a very important thing that we've clarified is that the TNRD would not become the owner or operator of the system until all the requirements are met, or at the very least, until all of the funding to meet the requirements is secured. So the example would be, so if the community through a survey says they're very interested in becoming a TNRD system, but only under the condition that they could be successful on getting a grant, then great, we have public assent saying that they're willing to borrow that money. But that doesn't mean it becomes our responsibility. It means that they've said that we could apply for a grant if one came available on their behalf. And then only if we are successful in the grant, then would we actually move into actually taking over ownership and making those improvements. So it's a challenging message, because we didn't want to, we wanted to make sure to be clear, but also not to, bust all hope of what that could look like. But so there a couple of questions were around, and I think it was good that it came out in a number of different questions asking for clarity. So if we voted for 100% funding from the residents, does that mean we could move forward with the TNRD? And the answer to that was, well, needing to check a few more boxes, but essentially, yes, that means we've guaranteed we have the funding through public assent to borrow the full amount needed to do these upgrades, and then we could move forward on those improvements. But under the other scenario, if they wanted to move forward only if there's grant funding available, that's only if we're successful in the grant. Otherwise, it continues until that point to be them who own and operate the system. And the other catch is that the public assent approval expires after 5 years. So after 5 years, it ends and they would have to go through it again if they wanted to approve the public assent, the borrowing again. So we clarified that either way, this is still a multi-year process. There's no flip the switch overnight decision this could be made. Even if they through the survey wanted to move forward with 100% funded through residents, this wouldn't be, we're still early on in the process. This wouldn't be a public assent that would happen this year. This would be at earliest next year. And I see there's a question from the chair, and I'm just going to put up the last slide. The Paul Lake Waterworks spoke about, well, what if the TNRD isn't there? What are their options? And in there, again, they spoke to their specific scenario of talking about, well, increasing fees again, looking at other options to maybe make some minor improvements to sort of limp the system along. And they're dealing with, I think, what a lot of private systems are, is lack of capacity, volunteers and labor to actually do the work. So there was some discussion around that. And I'll leave it at that. Questions, discussion?
Okay, I just wanted to get some clarity. They're currently paying $110 a month, which is $1,320 a year. And that's just to run their system as is. And then on top of that, if you take your 2,000,007 number by 45 households, I think is your guess, that's about $60,000. So if they were to take it upon themselves to install this system at 2.7 million, that's gonna be 45 households agreeing to come up with $60,000 each in order to do that. Have I got that kind of right?
Yeah, Tyrone just clarified, it's 51 connections, 51 connections. But the slide that I showed on the costing there with the $7,000 per year, that's all that calculation built in there. So assuming that we borrow the money, it's a 20-year payback through MFA, their annual parcel tax or their annual rates would be 7,000.
I was looking at it the other way, where because that's where we're somehow getting involved with it. But if I've got the correct number, even if it's 45, it's probably $55,000 instead of $60,000 that they would each have to pay in order to upgrade.
Yes.
And show up at our door with a completed operating system that's ready to go. So that's the magnitude that we're
Correct.
We're
Yes,
looking at.
correct. And sorry, I misunderstood.
Does anybody have any questions about this? And are you looking for some kind of feedback from the?
No, this is really for information for this committee, because I know all of you, whether you know it or not, I think have systems utility systems in your areas that are not TNRD systems, either run by improvement districts, private entities, or some combination of volunteer groups, et cetera. And I'm anticipating that more and more year after year, we're going to have more people knocking at our door. So I just, again, wanted this committee to be aware, and as electoral area directors to be aware that we're going through this process. This is what it looks like. So I even shared this with Director Thorpe, just the report, so she could see, what the kind of the details of the feasibility study look like, what kind of things you would look at. So if you have people knocking in your door, say, here's an example of what we would do. So then they have a sense of it. And I guess part of it is helpful to understand that, and what the study shows clearly is there's no middle ground here. There's no halfway, we'll take it on and limp it along and help you. We could take it on, it's got to be upgraded to meet our requirements, and then we'll.
And I just did a quick number, take $16 million on Savinaw and roughly 300 households. That's $53,000. So basically you're looking somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000 per household. When we get into these kinds of situations, it seems pretty pricey. Go ahead.
Thank you. I found the presentation to be really interesting, and I know one of our communities in Area B has improvement district running their water system, and I really feel for these people, and I feel for other communities that are going to be faced with this. What would be the scenario if the Paul Lake, yeah, like what was PL? If Paul Lake's water works shut their doors, the TNRD hadn't taken it over, what actually would happen for those people, like through the provincial or federal government? Would someone actually step in to help them, or how does that look?
So good question. They asked the same question. So it would default to the province being responsible. In the past, a lot of the systems that we did acquire came to us because then once the province ended up with them, they came knocking on our door and handed them over to the TNRD. And that actually is one of the reasons that we move forward to have a clear board policy. So whether or not it was a private system knocking on the door or the province knocking on our door, we can say this is our policy. But the answer to the question is the province would ultimately end up being responsible. What that looks like, I don't really know. I think it's case by case. I don't know if Tyrone has any experience. You can comment on it further. It's not a fun scenario.
It seems like it might be something that might end up happening in the nearest future throughout the province. Yeah.
Director Thorpe.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you could put that last slide on the screen so I can screenshot it. And then I had one more question. It's sort of related to Director Onslow. If you had a really tiny system that had under 10 people on it, what would again, I guess it's a case by case, but what would the province do?
We don't know. It's a good question. It's a question for the province. Yeah. And I mean, I could say this much, the strategy, and I think as you're aware, Director Thorpe, the strategy is the province is pushing back against the water purveyor to force them to provide what they're obligated to provide. So that is their first mechanism. But yeah, if that owner ceased to exist or became bankrupt or passed away, those are all realistic scenarios. And that's a question for the province.
Is there any other questions? Anybody online? Director Smith? Anything? No?
I'm good.
Okay. I guess we have no questions further on this, Paul. Okay, go ahead, Lee.
Sorry, it's a last minute, last pause question, but potentially these smaller systems are going to continue to pop up. We're getting growth in certain areas. Let's use Area P as an example. And you're going to get more and more of these clusters, possibly. Are there any economies of scale between these various projects? Are there any common denominators or economies of scale that would apply as we start to see further densification growth and that kind of thing? It's in the sky kind of question, but it does speak to the long term.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Tyrone could add to this if he wants. I guess a couple things. We don't see the risk of the new developments. It's more of these developments that were built 50 years ago in these water systems. And yes, there is economies of scale. So if there is further development, I mean, I'll use our systems for example. The best thing that could happen for most of our systems is we have more development and more connections and gain more economies of scale. Going back to our rate review, that's why even though I'm you know, maybe the residents of Savona won't be happy for me to say this, but you know, their rates are the lowest of the TNRD. We did increase them, but they're lower than other areas, or have been lower than other areas because they have more economies of scale compared to the small systems, compared to the Deloro and Black Pines that have much higher rates.
So Mr. Vieira, are you suggesting then maybe that we should be looking to solve some of their problems by increasing density and unit count around where systems are existing today, like Savona? There is a portion of Savona that is a future subdivision that I've heard about, but it doesn't seem like anything's happening there. Should we be putting in policies through our planning department that would encourage more users so that we could get better economy of scale?
Yeah, good question. That's a bit of a loaded question. I'll start off by saying when we first started lobbying the province about this issue of small and very small water systems and not being financially sustainable, that was their response. Their response was saying, well, get more development in there or try connect to other systems. And which, you know, we understood their logic, but then at the same time we're laughing because how do we connect, you know, a system in Pritchard to the system up in Paul Lake? Like, we're not going to run pipe 40 kilometers through a mountain. So again, I guess I'll go back to just saying, yeah, development would help. How do we encourage development in these areas? That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, if it's not happening now, if those properties were there, I don't know if I can comment on that any further.
Is there any other, Director Haywood?
It's probably a dumb question, but I'm not into this kind of stuff aside from my own little well at home. With the climate problems that we're having, if we lose an aquifer on one of these systems, what is our responsibility to all of those people that are on the aquifer if there's no water anymore there?
Yeah, great question. So the systems that we own and operate, we are responsible for providing them water. That is our problem to solve. And Tyrone spoke about the drought resiliency planning that we got a grant for that we're doing. That's the reason we need to figure that out. That's a risk. That's always the biggest risk is running out of water.
Any, Director Houghton?
Just a quick question. Seems like your department is, I wouldn't say understaffed, but struggling for help. Adding more systems, what's that going to do to our workload other than increase it? And how's that going to fit into our overall plan?
Yeah, a very good question. Under our kind of operation maintenance budget, like the hypothetical in this feasibility study, that included covering the staffing costs, all the TNRD costs associated with it. So I would say, generally speaking, there's economies of scale across, you know, within our own TNRD. If there was good, well-functioning meeting 43210 requirement systems that wanted the TNRD to take them on, we would probably be eager to do that because that would help our department, because we're getting economies of scale in the department. People who have well-running new systems don't typically knock on our door and ask to hand them over to us for free. It's the ones that are broken and not working.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions about the Paul Lake? Because we're coming up to new business otherwise. I've got some stuff under new business. Does anybody else have anything? No? All right, and the guys online? No? So I attended FCM in Calgary, and Mr. Vieira referred to an initiative under FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities. The whole tenor of the meeting was that municipalities and local government cannot fund the infrastructure that they're assigned to run solely through property taxation. And they initiated this lobbying last year at the federal government and I guess the provincial government levels. And And they were quite boisterous about this. We need to carve up the pie differently. There's one taxpayer of federal, provincial, and property tax, but local government needs more than just the property tax component to keep things running. And the irony was that the day the conference started, the Calgary water system blew up. So the voyant alert literally went off that morning, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I just got to Calgary and there's a fire. But it was actually the voyant alert saying, hey, we got a water problem. And as we've been watching on the news, even after FCM, it's a pretty severe water problem. We've heard this presentation today, and we have started our lobbying process. We have quite a plan with the UBCM and the SILGA and Corbin and meeting with ministers. But it seems to me that with the dollar figures we're seeing, we ought to try to leverage the FCM connection. We're spending dough to go there, and I think that we should take advantage of the BC caucus, which is they have a caucus for every province or area, and I think we should get our TNRD regional government example on the, and it's perfect timing, Corbin. So I think what I'd like to do is to propose a motion that we pursue lobbying through FCM and use of Corbin's time to see if we can put some of this together as a case study and see if we can go to somebody other than just the province. Maybe the federal government could kick in on some of these programs. So is there, I'll open it for discussion because it's just an idea that I'm putting together now, but it's in light of what we're hearing today. Any comments? Online, Director Sal.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. I fully agree with seeking help, not just from the province, but federally. I've been on the road in Australia for the last month, and I've been seeing some of these communities of 300 people with a hospital, with a water park, with water system, community parks. And I talked to some of the locals, and they said, and I Googled it up, their government there actually has a per capita, has a policy where funding from at the federal level, taxes at the federal level goes back to the local communities on a per capita basis. So it seems to me they share a lot more resources between the different orders of government, not just, provincial and federal holding it to themselves. So that's awesome that we get the involved at the federal level too through FCM and also the provincial caucuses of FCM. Yeah, thank you for that, Mike.
Anybody else have any thoughts? So what would we need? Is it informal or formal that we have to? I think we have to go back to the regular board, but I'd really like to advance this. I don't think we can just sit here and, I know you're not just waiting. You're doing what you can do, but we've got to step up our game.
So a couple things, and maybe I'll look to Greg or Marnie to comment on it as well. In terms of process, this committee just has authority through the board. So a recommendation would need to go through the board. So this committee would make a recommendation to the board that they pursue, what my notes were, pursue lobbying through FCM for utility infrastructure funding. If that was kind of the flavor, I guess the mechanism of pursue lobbying through FCM, I guess that's just direction to the board and staff then to actually pursue that avenue, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think very specifically advocacy and giving direction, I think, to Mr. Kelly through FCM and the BC caucus of FCM with a specific ask of the federal government for infrastructure funding on TNRD water utilities. Is that?
Hey, hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, through to the chair. I think I just also want to remind everyone, so there is coming up at UBCM this year, we have requested a meeting with the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And at UBCM 2023, the minister did suggest that there was a possibility for a pilot project for some type of sustainable funding system for specifically small utility systems and more specifically small water utility systems. With that recognition, our request this year is specifically tying back to the minister's comments about a potential pilot program. Unfortunately for budget 2024, the deadline was missed and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs was not asked to participate in the budget consultation process and get additional funding in budget 2024. So our request this year is that looking to budget 2025, that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs works with caucus and through the budgetary process to ensure that there is funding that could set up a sustainable model that could use budget 2025 as sort of the pilot year for that. In addition, I do agree that there's certainly room for the federal government, but I think, you know, more broadly speaking, in terms of sort of a strategy, I think we should certainly wait until after UBCM to see what the provincial sort of commitments are there before we start going too hard on the federal government, so that we at least understand where the province is willing to come in. Because perhaps the minister says this year, I mean, I'm fairly certain what the answer is going to be, which is that they can't commit to any funding because we're in an election year and government's in caretaker mode. But if they're somehow able to you know, commit to anything other than that, I think it would be prudent for us to know that before we start lobbying federal government, so that we can have more specific asks of the feds and know where that lays out. So I want to just sort of, I don't know, Chair, if you have some thoughts on that, but that's sort of where I was thinking based on your comments.
So, Mr. Kelly, your concern is that an initiative through the FCM portal might interrupt what we could do at UBCM. So it's a timing question, but would you agree that we should, at the right time, pursue the FCM route as well? Because if that's the case, then let's get this meeting, let's get this motion out there, leave it to you to decide the timing. But I'd like to be able to go back to our constituents and say, we're not just hammering on the provincial doors, we're now hammering on the federal doors. And with all the obvious comparisons at federal level where Indigenous communities have been saying, hey, we got a water problem, we're on boil water advisories. Well, we're on boil water advisories at the TNRD. So if Indigenous communities are getting funding, maybe we should be able to get some participation at the federal level too. Is there any opposition to that? Okay.
Sorry, this is just top of mind. I didn't realize we're going completely down this road. I think I'm certainly going to defer to the experts on our advocacy platforms, which are a number of you. The cost, two cautionary things. I think one is we want to engage at a provincial level as best we can. And we are in a year where, you know, there are some elections happening. So I think we need to make sure we're putting our focus of effort there as well. And then B, that the federal side, and you were speaking about some of our First Nations communities, that would be something for us to be considering. But let's be cautious on that as well, because we need to step lightly and play second fiddle possibly if necessary. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Director Houghton.
I think we should get going on it, get the ball rolling like you suggested, Director Grenier, because 2025, I believe we got a federal election coming up, so
Right.
we should start now.
Director Vieira, or Mr. Vieira.
Yeah, so I just after listening to Corbin's comments, thinking about at least the way I jotted down what I thought the flavor of the motion was or the suggestion was, is that, yeah, if you wanted to move this forward to the TNRD board, keeping it vague around pursue lobbying through FCM does open that door, give us direction to start opening those doors, because yeah, we haven't gone down that road very far. Like you said, there's regional representation FCM, we could start making those connections. But I do agree with Mr. Kelly's comments about let's play out the UBCM as far as we can. But at the same time, we could at least be investigating the FCM options and route further. So yeah, my suggestion would be to keep the motion vague, but it could.
And I'm mindful that at our board of directors meetings, we've been talking about staff's time and where we ask staff to apply their time. So what I'm suggesting is that we formally, as this committee, recommend to the board that at the appropriate time, staff apply lobbying efforts, not just through UBCM, but also through FCM on this very specific water funding issue. And I was just using more as an example that we have other communities, Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, that have boil water advisories. So to the extent that the federal government is responding to those boil water conditions, we have that situation here. That was the only comparison, not to say we need it more than anybody else. So is there a formal write down that we could read out and then vote on it, or?
Well, I'll just repeat what I had here and I'll wait for Marnie or Greg to jump in. Because what I had said there is a pursue that the committee recommended to the board that lobbying efforts through FCM be pursued for utility infrastructure funding. How does that sound? Looking around to staff too. Sound good?
Yes, I would just include that the committee direct the board or request the board direct staff.
Okay, so that worked out motion. Any discussion about that? Director Thorpe.
Just one. I like the vagueness because it also includes the municipalities, because I think some of the smaller municipalities are probably having challenges and will get more support if it's not specific to the regional, to the area directors ones. So thank you.
Okay, all in favor of the oh, go ahead.
Actually, we require a mover and a seconder for this.
So moved.
Director Houghton and Director Smith. Thank you. All in favor? And the guys online are supposed to talk, right?
Aye.
Director
Aye.
Stout? Okay. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I had also under new business, Mr. Vieira, we had talked about a potential water package plant that sounded like it might be something that worked at Savinaw Equipment. And in our last conversation, you were going to check up with that to see if there's anything new on that. So I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'll have to send you a follow-up email on that one specifically. I don't have it in front of me. I did run that concept by our engineers and got a response, but sorry, I don't have that in front of me right now. I said I did run that concept by our engineers and got a response, which I'll share with you. I just don't have it in front of me right now to speak to.
All right, is there any other new business that anybody would like to raise or talk about? Okay, well, I think seeing none, productive bit of work and thanks, everybody. I guess we'll stand adjourned.